Welcome back to the Sunny Talk Spurs YouTube channel. And yet again, I'm joined by a special guest because this special guest has got a very big task when it comes to Tottenham transfers. It's the one and only Ben Bowman. How are you doing, Ben?
Very good, thanks, mate. Obviously, I know this is going out after the semi-final, but looking forward to tomorrow. Big game. It's been a miserable few weeks post Frankfurt, but feeling good, feeling optimistic ahead of the game. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of getting into everything transfer related in this video.
That's what I mean. I'm sort of struggling with transfer videos lately because we just don't know what the state of the club's going to be like. There's obviously
Yeah,
been
yeah.
reports this week from Matt Law saying that Tottenham might have to sell to buy, even though we've got 200 million that through PSR that we could possibly spend. But the task that I've given you, Ben, I've let you go away, and you've collated around 5 players who you think could fix and save Tottenham going into next season. And we obviously don't know what the state of play is going to be going into next season, but you've probably highlighted a few gaping holes to sort of, fix. Because I guess before we get into the players, my first question to you would be like, overall, looking at the Tottenham squad, what would you say, needs doing? Where are the fixes? Where the fire's got to be put out?
Midfield, I think, is one of the big ones. I think we've kind of been crying out for a six in a defensive sense for a long time, but also a six that can kind of control on the ball as well. So that is a big area. I think in defence, we're obviously going to need reinforcements going into the summer with rumours of Romero leaving. I think at fullback as well, I think we could probably do with someone else. But I think the big issue for Spurs for a long time has been that midfield. I think in terms of like under Ange especially, I think one thing that's regressed massively for us is that lack of ability to adapt to game state. And I think not having a commanding, controlling number six in there who can kind of just slow things down, take the sting out of the game, and play the game at the pace we want to play is something that we've massively lacked. Everyone in football is looking for that Rodri type profile, 100%. There aren't many of them, obviously, but that's that. I think that's a big thing for Spurs, kind of going into next year, and it's something that has kind of held us back, I think, quite a bit under Ange. I think that midfield, obviously, it's great. It's been amazing to see Lucas Bergvall kind of come to the fore this season. Obviously, new contract signed yesterday or earlier this week. And he's going to have a big part to play next season. But I still think I like him a little bit further up the pitch. And I still think that sixth position, despite the fact that they probably bought Gray to play there long term, is something that we still massively need to address now. And I think we saw off the back of the Liverpool game, chucking in Gray in there with a real lack of experience playing in that position in the Premier League, despite the fact that I think a lot of us fans have called for that for such a long time. That kind of showed that he's not really ready to do that yet. And I think he probably needs a full preseason playing there. And obviously, it depends managerial situation as well. Who's going to what position he kind of sees him best playing in as well. But I still think that's a big thing that Tottenham kind of need to address going into the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about the midfield the last couple of weeks, and it's such a weird situation because I feel like when we look at individuals, there's some good individuals at the club, but it is a lot of square pegs, round holes. It's like we see, Kulusevski and Maddison as creators, and Bergvall being maybe a more advanced eight, but there's just no one who's been able to play that six. Perfectly. We've had Bentancur sitting there, but his form's sort of been really up and down this season. And Basuma, we thought could have been that answer, and it never really worked out. And that's why when I've having discussions with everyone, neutrals especially go, oh, it's your defense that's the issue. I still think it's our midfield because the way it gets bypassed, the way that teams control us and turn us over, it's just and also it doesn't help us in an attacking sense because we're not able to really make the most of when we are counter-attacking teams or finding key passes, breaking lines against the low blocks. So I think you're spot on, mate, with everything you said. I think there's not one Spurs fan who would refuse a high quality number six this summer. So let's get into your players then. And obviously these are in no particular order. So who do you want to kick us off with?
I think the first one I'll start with is probably the most. It's probably, like I said, despite I think the midfield being the biggest issue and the most glaring thing that I think we need to solve going into the summer. I think the first port of call is probably at centre half because it's probably the most obvious. If especially if we don't get Champions League football by winning the Europa League, that's the most obvious area where we're going to lose a key man in Christian Romero. Obviously, there's been a lot of chat about him. He's been kind of speaking about his ambitions to play in Spain, although that interview I think was kind of a little bit taken out of context. But at the same time, I think it's quite clear that we know his ambitions probably exceed what Tottenham want to do, and he probably does want to leave the football club. So I think a replacement for Romero on the presumption that he does leave is kind of where I want to start. There's a few names that I think you could definitely chuck in here. I think in terms of what you lose on the ball with Christian Romero is obviously probably the biggest factor in terms of trying to find someone that can break lines like he can step up and be aggressive like he can, and make us an on the ball kind of front footed side. Like he's done that so well over the years at Spurs. John Paul Van Hecker is someone that I think in terms of line breaking passes is right up there with the numbers. And he's, he kind of passes the eye test whenever I watched him as well. So good, so aggressive on the ball, so front footed. In terms of an ideal replacement, I think he's a good fit, 100%. I think an interesting one as well, although he kind of tends to usually play on the left, it's going to be a big summer for someone like Jared Branthwaite as well. I think he's someone that Spurs have probably looked at for a while. A lot of clubs will be looking at him. Could he maybe come in? Antonio Silva at Benfica is someone that I've kind of thought about before. I remember when I did a video with Zach, actually, kind of similar to this almost, where it's like how to fix Tottenham going into next season. It was actually Pat that kind of put him forward. Again, someone who's very good on the ball. But I think my centre-back pick would be, in an ideal world, I think what Tottenham have massively lacked in a general sense, not just at centre half, although at centre half it's probably been the most prevalent, to be honest, is a real lack of stability. And although, and I've said this many times, and Crystal Palace fans have kind of given me a little bit of heat for saying that he's not quite as good on the ball as Romero, and I genuinely don't believe he is. That's not to say that Marc Guehi isn't bad on the ball, isn't good on the ball, because he very much is. He can play in any sort of system, can play in a back three, can play as part of a back two as well, as we saw for England in the Euros in the summer. I think Guehi would be the one for me. If you can get him for around 50, 60 million, 50 million, hopefully in the last year of his Palace contract, obviously. Again, it's going to be a bit of a bun fight for his signature in the summer. Newcastle will be there. Chelsea will be there, despite the fact that Chelsea are looking at Dean Howson, who was another one that I thought about as well. But I do think Spurs need a leader, need experience to come in and replace someone like Romero, because we've got another really promising young talent at centre-half coming through the door with Vuskovic anyway. I don't think it makes sense to activate someone like Howson's release clause, despite how big a talent he is, in my opinion. I think you need to kind of shop in the pool of someone being a bit more experienced, has got really good leadership capabilities. It was England's best player at the Euros, not just best defender. Like I said, if depending on who the manager's going to be, for argument's sake, maybe if it's someone like a Thomas Frank, who has been known to switch between the 4 at the back and 5 at the back system. If it was Oliver Glasner, who predominantly plays a 5 at the back system, obviously Guehi is, that's probably his kind of bread and butter, can play at the centre of it, can play on the left-hand side of it, which is actually his wrong side. He's right-footed, but he doesn't look like it, which also means if you're going to lose Van der Ven for an extended period of time as well, with injury, Marc Guehi can also shift over to the left-hand side and cover there, and then you can bring Danso in or Vuskovic in as well. So I just think he's, like I said, Spurs have, with the playing style, obviously this season, there's obviously so much chaos around the football club. I think bringing in someone like Marc Guehi, who's just a very good character, great temperament, composing his defending, has got good leadership capabilities, could come in and probably be the new club captain as well if Sonny was to leave in the summer, or maybe leave next year, with a view to Guehi becoming the captain after that. Obviously, if we didn't get Champions League football, then it would be very difficult to prize him away from Palace. And I think you have to start maybe looking at other options, given the fact that Spurs reportedly had to sell to buy as well. But Romero is one of those players that I think likely will be sold whatever happens. So I think Guehi's the one for me. Just that calming presence, that bit of stability that I think Tottenham really, really need. And we've said it, and it's going to be a similar conversation when we come into kind of midfielders as well. But like, we've just lacked leaders. That's something that we've spoken about so many times. The Jed Spence interview, where he really had to think about it. It's not just the players saying it; the fans have been saying it for such a long time. So I think Guehi ticks a lot of boxes for Spurs, despite not being the ideal Romero replacement in terms of profile necessarily. I think he's just more of a, and it's probably doing Guehi a bit of a disservice just to label him as a bit of a steady Eddie, but he's just really consistent, really good box defender, good on the ball, ticks a lot of boxes for me, good leader. I really like Marc Guehi.
Yeah, I mean, have to echo what you say there. When I did a video reacting to the Romero Atletico Madrid links, I touted Marc Guehi then. We'd obviously been linked with him in January. Don't know how much of that was, concrete, or if it was just, Levy putting out those sort of news lines to get the fan base a little bit excited. But
Probably, yeah.
the problem I had was price, because last year, Newcastle got some bids rejected, didn't they, around that 70 million mark? But I can imagine if Levy does sell Romero, he would want a world record fee for a defender. He'd be like, "Come on, put it on the table. I paid around 50 million mark for this player anyway." Atletico Madrid do pay up for transfers like this sometimes. We've seen with João Felix and some of Julian Alvarez last summer as well. They do put up some good money for transfers, surprisingly, in that league. I think you're spot on. I mean, I was at the Euros and watched him in every game. He was England's best player. He came in a surprise role because we didn't think he would come in and be such, that calm and collective player when, England were without, Harry Maguire and John Stones, that really famous partnership that has worked so well, or had worked so well for Gareth Southgate. So he came in and was just really, really good. And I think the only point I want to add to this, because you basically ticked all the boxes in what you were saying there, was it looks like Spurs are moving towards, they really wanted to get that English homegrown quota on the good side. And, they signed Solanke, they signed Archie Gray. So, adding Guehi to this would be even better. The only negative you've said as well is it is going to be, I think there is a lot of teams fighting for a lot of centre-backs, Dean Howson, as you say there, he will be probably one of the first ones to go, and then people will then start looking at Marc Guehi. So if this doesn't give an incentive for Spurs to, really go out there and try and win the Europa League and, get into the Champions League football for that revenue to get these players of this caliber in, then, I don't know what will. But I think what I get from the logic of what the news of selling to buy means, if you're selling Romero, that money would go straight into buying, hopefully, a Marc Guehi. And then when you look at Spurs' defenders, you've then got, Van der Ven, as you say, he could potentially get injured, but he's there. Marc Guehi, Radu Dragusin, who under a new manager, I think could be a lot better because he's not being asked to play the high line, and he could sit a bit deeper and show off his defensive nous that we've seen. You've got Luka Vuskovic coming in. You've got Kevin Danzo, who I think has been quite good since he's come in, who they sort of know they're the third and fourth choice options. And then you've got, as I say, Luka Vuskovic and, Ashley Phillips potentially is then an option who could then be loaned out. I think then we're quite comfortable for many years in that defensive area. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm still not with Dragusin. I'm still not massively sold, but I definitely hear what you're saying in terms of like actually playing in a system that might suit him a little bit more. He's not going to be as exposed, but I still think you lose a lot on the ball. And I really like Danso as well. But again, I think that I don't think, despite I've been quite impressed with what I've seen from him, I think he ticks a lot of the boxes for just being a really good squad option. I still think Spurs need to go out and really replace Romero. And again, I totally understand why a lot of Spurs fans have lost patience with Romero, been really frustrated with him. I totally get it. But it's not just like we can't just afford to lose this player and just kind of get rid of him without going in and buying someone of similar quality. And I think Marc Guehi is definitely that. But I do hear what you're saying. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens with Vuskovic next season. Obviously, Ashley Phillips, like you said, is another one as well who's had a really impressive loan spell at Stoke. I think that's a good opportunity for Spurs to try and flip some money there, if I'm being honest. I don't know how ready he is for Premier League level, or despite, I mean, who knows what level of Premier League quality Spurs are going to be at next season. But in terms of ambition for the club where we should be, I'm not 100% sure that he's ready to make that step up. I think either another loan or maybe an opportunity to sell him to a top-end Championship club who would have probably been quite impressed with what they saw with Phillips at Stoke this season, despite the fact they've obviously had a really poor season themselves. I think there's an opportunity to kind of make a little bit of profit there on Phillips. But Vuskovic, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with him. I think he's just a bit of a freak profile that I think could, if you look at, I know it's obviously a different position, and I think different positions have different adjustment periods, in terms of getting used to the league, etc. But you look at the way that Bergvall has kind of stepped up, playing at a similar level, really, in Sweden to what Vuskovic is playing at in Belgium right now. And he's made it look seamless, especially in the second half of the season. Obviously, he had his struggles in the first half, definitely. but second half of the season he's taken to the Premier League like a duck to water, and in Europe as well, been so impressive. And for Vuskovic, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar based off of what we've seen so far. And also with Vuskovic, like, again, a lot of it is about his aerial presence, his ability to win duels, his physicality. But again, I saw an assist that he made last week. Lovely little clip ball over the top for one of their strikers or wingers to go on and finish it. He's comfortable on the ball as well. So long term, I definitely kind of see him as playing a big part for Spurs. If we're in Europe again next year, I mean, our only avenue to be in Europe is by being in the Champions League, which would 100% make the need for going and signing a more experienced centre-back even greater. But that means there's probably going to be more opportunities for someone like a Vuskovic to actually play, because we're going to need that squad. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, I think Marc Guehi, like I said, ticks a lot of boxes for the centre-back that I would like in an ideal world.
Yeah, so Marc Guehi goes on our transfer list, or your transfer list, and as the owner in this situation, I'm not saying I am the Daniel Levy, but because I'd sign anyone, but yeah, he'd definitely be high up on my list. Next player, then Ben, who have you got?
There was a couple here that there's a couple of positions that I've kind of bit undenied a little bit about whether we would actually need. Because I was thinking about strikers, and I was thinking about the fact that I think this summer is like the last opportunity we're probably going to have to cash in on Richarlison. I think that needs to happen. I say cash in, we're going to make a big loss, but get some sort of feedback for him. I don't know how reliable it was, but I saw Everton were kind of linked with him the other day, and I was like, that would just be the perfect move for all parties. Go back somewhere that you loved. First season in the new stadium, we get, I'll take 30 mil right now. And I wouldn't mind going and spending that 30 million on Liam Delap. I'm not saying I'm not totally there yet. But I do think we're going to need another striker. But I've also kind of got a little bit of thinking with another player a little bit further down the line that might sort of slightly impact it. But Delap is someone that I think offers something different to Dom Solanke. I think he's more of a box presence. He's more of a poacher in and around the area, that ability to snuff out chances, which is something that, despite his inconsistency and his fitness and availability, that is something that you never lose with Richarlison. I think that's been quite prevalent in the last few games, that ability to kind of, especially against Forest, don't get me wrong, there's some of the misses that were really frustrating, but what you can't knock is his ability to kind of snuff out a chance and make space for himself. There's actually not many better strikers in the Premier League in those kind of situations than Richarlison. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot better strikers in the Premier League in terms of an overall package, but crosses coming into the box, finding half a yard, getting a head on it or getting something on it, he's very good. And I feel like Delap, despite the fact that I think we've seen so many strengths of his this season more in terms of his ball carrying and his running at players, there's also been so many goals where he's just found half a yard and really cutely kind of finished. And he's a bit of a battering ram as well. He's just a bit of I think bring him on for 20 minutes, it can really kind of cause a bit of carnage. Good rotation option for Solanke. But I'm a bit stuck because I also firmly believe that Spurs should. Well, I firmly believe that Spurs should exercise the option to sign Matisse Tel. Whether it's at the 50, 60 million euro price mark or not, I'm not sure, but I would rather take the chance and not miss out on him. But if we could negotiate for a lower fee, then I think that would be ideal for everybody, really. And it feels like Bayern want to get rid. Which, I mean, some people might look at that as a bit of a red flag and say, well, they don't even want him. It's Bayern Munich. They're one of the best teams in the world. Surely if they had that good of an eye for talent, why would they be so desperate to get rid of him? But I feel like there's an opportunity for them to get some of their money back, and they're going to be quite hot on someone like Gittins or Wirtz, for example. So they're trying to drum up a bit of money. That's how I see it. It's not that they don't rate him. But if Spurs could kind of get him for a bit of a lower fee. And also the conundrum that I've kind of got is that I still don't think Tel is necessarily ready to be a Premier League striker. I think he's kind of shown that so far in some of the games that he has played up front. But I do believe long term that he's going to develop into more of a number 9. So it's like, would I rather? Can you sign? I guess my kind of point is that, can you sign Delap and Tel unless you're primarily using Tel to kind of be the successor to Son, and he's going to play the majority of his Tottenham career out on that left-hand side, which is something that I could also see as well. So maybe there is room to sign both, because like I said, I still do believe there is the need for Tottenham to go out and sign a number 9. I don't think that, I mean, again, very dependent on the manager, but how much of an opportunity is Dane Scarlett going to get next season? He sort of came in for a little bit under Ange again, and then they kind of haven't really seen him in the last few weeks or last kind of couple of months, really. Will Lancashire is someone that I think definitely needs another loan next year. I think West Brom, he's kind of found a decent level where he can showcase his skills. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. They're kind of similar price point. Obviously, Delap has got that release clause, but maybe I'm just kind of greedy and sign both because there's other wingers that I've kind of got my eye on as well. Jamie Gittins would be one of them again if we've got Champions League football. I think in terms of that on that left hand side, now is the summer to find that replacement for Son. It definitely is. Like whether Son's here or not, like that has to happen this summer. I know we've obviously got Mikey Moore there. We've got Luca Williams-Barnett there as well. But I kind of both see them, despite the fact that some fans are a bit worried about the signing of Tell kind of blocking the pathway for a couple of those players. I don't really see that as much because I kind of see Moore and Williams-Barnett's long-term future coming inside the pitch a little bit more. Mikey Moore kind of playing as a little bit more of a number 10, being the long-term successor to someone like Maddison rather than as a left winger. But again, having the versatility to be able to play out there as a winger as well is something that's going to be really, really handy for Moore and for Williams-Barnett, who I kind of see a similar development path in terms of their position to Moore. So I don't really necessarily see that in terms of blocking their path. I think I would go out and spend. The difficulty is that we do need the argument for not signing Tell. I totally understand that we need experience in this squad. We can't keep signing kids. We do need to balance it. But also on the flip side of that, I think there are some talents that you just can't really ignore. And I'm not saying Tell has set the world alight while he's been at Spurs, but I think over the last few games, you've really started to see it come together more. That confidence, that attitude that he's got, I think is something that we've been really lacking. And again, leaders don't necessarily have to be your really experienced older players, despite the fact that, again, like I said, we need to balance it and get some of those through the door as well. But it's the way he kind of leads by example when he's on the pitch. So brave, wants the ball. You can just tell he's got something. You can tell he's got it. And I feel like it would be a little bit of a misstep for Spurs to miss out on him and he maybe goes somewhere else, which I could definitely see happening as well. I could kind of see Chelsea being back in the frame. So I think I would go for Tell as my second signing around that kind of 40 million mark, meet somewhere in between the 30 million and the 50 million that Bayern will probably be asking for. And then I think Delap, again, I think he's going to go to Man United. So it's difficult to say. But again, I do think I think Spurs need to go out and sign a striker. And I think Delap would be a really good option. So I'll go with him as well, to be honest. To just be a little bit greedy and have Tell as that Son kind of replacement and Delap kind of coming in as well as a backup striker to Solanke, someone that can kind of rotate and generally kind of give him some good competition.
Yeah, I feel like the Liam Delap situation it's strange, isn't it? Because all the clubs that are involved, I was having a debate with some of the guys, Joe, Zach, and that about Delap, and a lot of people were saying Newcastle as a rotation with Isak, and I was like, but I feel like Delap would want first team minutes, and as you say, Chelsea. He probably could get that, but Chelsea are a bit of a basket case. Same with Manchester United because he would probably automatically start over Xerxes.
He's more likely to get it at United, isn't he? I think.
But again, would you want to go to them? And it depends if they win the Europa League. Like, there's so many hypotheticals in his move of what is the perfect fit for him. The 30 million's like a no-brainer for any club to trigger. Really, it's just it depends on. It's so funny because gone are the days. I mean, when we used to have four strikers like Defoe, Berbatov, Pavlyuchenko, Robbie. You just don't do that in football anymore because not many people pay two up top. So yeah, I think Delap is like, yeah, you take it, but I can't see Spurs operating in that sort of clever way. But I like the idea of it. And with Tell, I mean, you've probably seen it. I mean, I did a short form video that went out on TikTok and YouTube and stuff, basically like about month into his signing and sort of said we shouldn't be triggering it. What were the club thinking? And a part of it was me thinking, the whole of him going backwards and forwards between like he wasn't going to sign and then he did. But then my total assessment was, what were the club thinking getting a 19-year-old with, who has showed potential but still is quite inexperienced, and you've chucked him in at the deep end at a club that's in absolute turmoil. But then what has happened since then is you said about leadership on the pitch. I think he showed it so much off it. Those videos of him, going up to the fans and chatting with them and doing lots of post-match interviews. He doesn't have to do that, especially as a player on loan. And my now assessment of it is if we can get that fee to 40 or 50, and hopefully we say to Bayern, because of with the Harry Kane deal, or there's some sort of negotiation that can be had that we do that, because what's going to happen, and it's such the Spurs way that he will go to someone else, he will thrive, and we'll be like, that's the player we were hoping for. And I think it's good value that he is so good on the wing. I think against Frankfurt he was like electric. He was just that option that, and I like it when I watch him or Odebear, going directly at full backs and really like not being afraid to, like we've seen from PSG and Barcelona this season, the Champions League, like people not being afraid to take on their man. And as a striker, I guess he's got a lot to learn because, can he play with his back to goal? What's his hold-up play and link-up play like? Because some of those games where he was being chucked at striker, it was really early doors and they were tough fixtures for him to really like, what are you meant to do? Like when you're coming on as a late sub, if you score, everyone's going to be like, wow, look at this player. If you don't, it's like, oh, £8 million loan fee. What was Spurs thinking? So I do like those ideas. And I think what that does is Spurs had been operating like that for years, haven't they? Like loaning players with options, and like with Kulusevski, Porro, and I even think there's like Danzo's a loan with an option or an obligation.
Yeah, Romero was the same as well. It's happened quite a lot.
So, yeah, I think if we can get that fee down, I think I really like the idea of keeping Tell now. I think he probably gets it. And, having a pre-season, having a fresh start in the summer would be really good as long as that fee is respectable. With Delap, all I'd say is I think we'll be beaten to his signature. It makes so much sense, but Tottenham don't operate on sense sometimes because our transfer... I mean, I was saying this on the video the other day. I'll quickly say this now. I feel like we never know what our transfer strategy is. Like, we're now signing loads of youngsters with potential, but then sometimes we'll sign a player with experience like a Solanke or a Maddison. But I say experience, like not the top level, maybe leadership that a lot of Spurs fans are crying out for. So that's where it's very weird. Like, we've gone from Paratici and then to Johan Langer. Like it's just so confusing. And going into this summer now with maybe Scott Munder departing and the new CEO coming in, it's so up in the air. But I mean, that's why they should get you in the boardroom, mate.
Well, that's the thing. I think that youth-led approach is going to continue. I definitely think that is going to kind of be the strategy going forward. And I do think you can go that way as long as you sprinkle that bit of experience on the top. And also these players are going to be continuing to develop into more experienced players themselves. Obviously, there's question marks over Vicario's consistency, but one thing you can't knock is his leadership. Like that is one thing that he's been very strong about since he's kind of been at Spurs. He's obviously a good figure around the dressing room and on the pitch as well, despite the fact that at some point it might annoy fans. I do think he is a good leader. I just think there's other areas of his actual game that he kind of definitely needs to improve upon. I think you're right about Delap. I do think we will be beaten to it. I think he's going to go to Man United. I think he'll go to United over Chelsea because this is a player that I think needs to be playing. And that might slightly contradict my thing of bringing him into play as a rotation option. But that's about his decision. If you're making that decision as a club to bring someone like him in as a as a rotation for Solanke, then from a club's point of view, or whoever it is, whether it's Newcastle for Isak or whether it's potentially someone like a Villa for Watkins or whoever it is, because I think Delap needs to... I wouldn't be surprised. I would actually be surprised. But if I was him, if I was him, I'm going to be taking the best deal possible for me, and his agent's going to be pushing that as well. But I think there's definitely a question to be a statement to be made about like going to someone like a Fulham or a Brighton or a Brentford, somewhere where it's going to be like another step up, and then you make that move after that. No disrespect to those clubs, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think so many other clubs have kind of gone down the route of bringing in these young talents. Obviously, United are doing a very similar thing to Spurs. Chelsea are obviously doing a very similar thing as well. So I understand why they're in and around him. But, 20 years ago, Delap at this point, after making an impact in his first season at Ipswich, scoring more goals than he's ever scored in the Championship, like he would be linked with 20 years ago, he would be linked with mid-table clubs. That would be happening. But it's not happening in modern football because so many other teams have kind of gone down this youth-led approach. I just think for Spurs it makes a lot of sense, just as kind of a different sort of profile, really. A bit more of a fox in the box, but also someone that can really carry and really run at defenders as well. He's a totally different weapon to Solanke. And I do feel like, as much as I've gone big on Solanke this season, as much as I do really like him, he's obviously struggled since he's come back from injury. And I do think Spurs need someone as an alternative who is a little bit more present in the box. And I think that's what Delap does give you as well, snuffing out his own sort of chances. Again, there's other kind of going to be other striker profiles like Delap who you could maybe go and get as well, potentially, to kind of make it either someone with a bit more experience or someone, if you're going to be beaten to the signature. You know, I don't know. No one's kind of really coming to mind at the moment, but and maybe it's one for the comments. But I'd be quite happy to see them both come through the door. I think with Tell, obviously, it kind of leads on to another position because our winger situation is going to be very interesting going into next season. Part of me still feels like we need one more as well as Tell. But maybe that's just because, and maybe that's not necessarily realistic because Johnson isn't going anywhere next season. Kulusevski hopefully isn't going anywhere. Odebear's not going anywhere. Obviously, like we mentioned, we've got Mikey Moore who can kind of play on both sides. And I think his long-term future is more in midfield through the middle as kind of a number 10. But if I'm being greedy, I would quite like one more, different kind of profile, because I do firmly believe that, and this is something that Kish from Lily White Lab has spoken about a lot this season. It's about wing kind of pairings and how they complement each other. Like you think about Sane and Sterling at Man City, right? The brilliance of both of those two is that it allowed Sterling to just be this final action player where he was just getting on the end of things. And Sane did so much of the work, terrorising defenders down the other wing, allowing for Sterling to kind of be that little bit more cherry on top of the cake. We can't go into another season where we're playing Son and Johnson, where they're two very much final action players, especially in Son's kind of latest stage of his career. He can't really do the 1v1 stuff as well, despite the fact that he's a good crosser from out wide and has got more to offer creatively probably than Johnson. It's really not ideal. And obviously if you're bringing in Tell, who I think would come in and hopefully be a starter from next season, I think Tell can do a bit of both. I think he's good 1v1. He's a good crosser. He's a good ball striker generally, but he can also be that final action player as well, kind of coming in off the other side. That's why I do really like the idea of Odebear and Tell kind of as a wing pairing. So I'm a bit torn on I'm a little bit torn on another winger because I was going to chuck a couple of names into the mix.
You might as well do that as your fourth player now then.
Well, this is the thing. So I've got two other positions that I kind of want to go at as well. Like,
okay,
it's going to be very interesting to see about the winger, about what other people think if we were to bring in Tell, whether we need one more. Maybe it's a little bit greedy. Like, I know he's not an out-and-out winger, but someone like Ryan Cherky, I think would just be quite fun. Who could maybe play on that right-hand side. Jagrova,
you can get him quite cheap, can't you, Ryan Churchy? I think there's like a £25 million, maybe release clause. I've heard like they're keen to maybe get rid because he's not been negotiating with them quite well this summer.
Yeah, Edon Jagrova, I think at Lille is someone as well who I've been really excited about this season. But I think if you're looking at two Prem-proven options who can maybe come in on the right-hand side, I'd be looking at Mbeumo and Semenyo, especially if Frank was to be the manager next season, someone who's just a real goal threat. But I do think that if we were to go into next season with Kulusevski, Odebear, Johnson, Tell, and who else have we got out of the way? Obviously, Yang's going to be coming back.
Yeah.
I still think part of me still thinks we could do with one more. I do think
Jamie Donnelly.
I mean, I think I see Donnelly's kind of future more as like a number 10. I think really.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. Part of me still feel like we need something else. I do feel like we need something else. But then again, is it going to be too stacked if we bring in like it's a difficult one.
A name that I chucked out quite recently, I did a little short as well that was like free transfers I'd like to see, and I mentioned Churchy. I also said Lookman potentially had another good season at Atalanta, and he's that direct winger who can get goals. Again, the problem is you've listed the players there. You'd have to shift a few, but who are you shifting? Because again, like you say, a lot of Spurs fans might say get rid of Johnson, but I don't think. I think he's due another 1 or 2 seasons before we're thinking
Yeah,
of that. I still think he's got a lot of potential.
That's the thing. I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of him, especially with the amount of games that we
Mm.
hypothetically will be playing next season with Champions League football. I don't think he's good enough to be a starter for Tottenham on a regular basis. I really don't. I think he's not rounded enough. He's not, he's not brave enough when he takes on his man. But you can't put a price on the output that he does give you. And I think he's a really useful man to have in the squad that you can kind of bring in. You know that in the last maybe 10 minutes of the game, he's going to consistently get himself in positions where he could score a goal. That is incredibly valuable. So I wouldn't be rushing to sell Johnson. But at the same time, it's going to be very interesting because I think a lot of this depends on how Ange or Tottenham's next manager next season will use Kulusevski, if Kulusevski is still here, which I think he will be. But whether they'll go back to using him as more of a right winger on a consistent basis, whether he will just be Tottenham's number 10 next year and Maddison will have to put up with sitting on the bench, or whether another manager might find a way to use both of them centrally. I don't think that will happen, but they might do. Just kind of basing that off some of the managers that we've been linked with. I think a lot of it depends on that, because I think if you've got if the next manager wants to use Kulusevski predominantly as a right winger, despite the fact that there are frustrations with him, maybe that lack of pace, I think if you can make up for that in other areas and other positions, like if you've got Odobert maybe on the other side, or you've got Tell on the other side, maybe I think it's fine. But I do still feel like we need, part of me, it might be a little bit greedy and might not make sense for squad building purposes, especially with some of the other players there and coming through. But someone like an Mbeumo, who is good on transition, knows how to score goals, especially if Frank was the manager, like having him.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when he said that.
Semenyo is another one as well who offers that versatility of being able to play on both sides. He's very direct. I think I don't know the stats now, but the first few months of the season, he was leading the numbers in terms of carries leading to a shot. He's a good presser as well. Like I said, good shot volume, likes to get them off, test the goalkeeper. Can be a bit frustrating at times, but I think that's something that Tottenham lack a little bit as well, that bravery to want to do that. I don't know. If Spurs sign Tell, are we going to sign another winger? My gut says no. But I'd be interested to see what you think on that.
Yeah, I think it's the confusing one, because we've been saying we need a winger for years, but that's area as you've just listed is so stacked. It's really hard to know, because I think when we were signing certain players, like maybe an Odobert, we thought potentially could he go out on loan, but he's shown enough this season, despite injury, that he can be in and around the first team. And then depending on who we are, if we are selling to buy, that's what makes the situation. Because as you've just said there, if we slap 50 million down on Tell, then there's not going to be much wiggle room for other players. Depends what competitions we are in. I think because with the other players, with a defender, with a midfielder, you could sign whoever really. That sounds rude, and they could play under many managers. But with wingers, depending on like each manager that we're linked with so many different managers who all play such different styles and will use their wingers so differently. So it's hard to really go like,
the profile is so
I
important.
guess Mbeumo would be the one who I could see fit in a lot of because he's like the modern Premier League winger, like a Salah type who can chip in with goals, chip in with assists, play, cut in, dribble to the byline, cross it. He can do everything, and he's surprisingly he's still quite young, all things considered. I mean, he would be my ideal if we lived in fantasy land and we could pluck someone out of. And do you know what? I remember you just saying that point about Delap, about how back in the day a striker or a player would go to a mid-table club. I think that is us, mate. I think we are that mid-table club that is the step before the big move again. So I mean, maybe
we shouldn't be, but I think you're definitely right. I think we that's where we're realistically at. I think I might. It's really nagging at me that I think we do need another one, but I'm also like, I really like Wilson Odobert. I do think another year in the Premier League next year. I think if he can stay fit on a more consistent basis, obviously he had issues with his hamstrings and other injuries as well, I think. But I would really like Odobert. Again, he ticks the box. He's been able to play both sides as well. He's got that relationship with Tell. They played together for under 21s France. I know a lot of this might be a little bit all over the place in terms of we need experience, but also I'm saying we should sign a kid and Tell and make the other winger, our other starting winger, maybe Odebear going into next season. But I think we saw in that Forest game what they can do to teams, especially against low blocks, like run, be direct, get crosses in the box. If you've got another striker that is a bit more clever in and around the box to snuff out some of those chances, if they find a little bit more consistency and composure in some of their crossing as well, I think I like the idea of that going into next season. And I think you can maybe find your experience in other areas. Like if Decky is here next year, he's another year older. Like he's a big character in this team. Maybe he kind of just takes the mantle as that number 10. And if you're going into that with Kulusevski in the 10, Odebear and Tell out wide, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. So I'm actually going to park the winger. I just think it's an interesting conversation. The next player I'm going to go for, I'm going to save the midfielder till last. I still think we could definitely do with another fullback. I think obviously the demands that Ange has placed on our fullbacks this season have been scary. Like obviously Porro running to the ground at Doggy wasn't given enough time to prepare for the season off the back of his injury. And I think we saw a really sluggish start off the back of that as a result. The one that jumps out to me straight away is someone that has been consistently improving year on year, I think, at Wolves. And Rayan Nouri is a brilliant footballer. Like technically so clever, so creative. I think he can play in a 4 at the back and a 5 at the back as well. I think he's a really good wing back in terms of getting up and down, getting crosses in the box as well. But again, if you're going to play with it, depending on who the manager is next season as well, obviously, if you want to use someone to come inside the pitch a little bit more, I think he's really creative, hard to get off the ball. And I think he's a fullback profile that, I think it's really good to if we're going to go into next season with Porro, Spence and Udogie as 3 fullbacks as standard and add one more on top of that. I think you've got Spence is someone that can play that wing-back role really well, get up and down. Udogie, I still think primarily is that. I think that engine is the biggest part of his game. I just don't think we've necessarily seen it as much this season because of how tired he has been. Although I think it started to come back in the last few weeks. I think Frankfurt, both legs, he was excellent. I really thought he was. But I think adding a bit more of a creative kind of fullback type to complement, to kind of have your Porro equivalent on the left-hand side, I think Aït-Nouri will be quite good for that. He's not as good a passer as someone like Porro. I think he's a good defender as well. He's strong in the duel. I just really like Aït-Nouri. I think I just think he's a bit of a baller, to be honest. I really, really like him. I think it's quite exciting and can play probably in a back 4 and a 5.
Yeah, I think the thing with him this summer is everyone keeps touting him for a big move, but I think there's a lot of fullbacks who are maybe higher in that pecking order for teams.
Yeah.
Kirkes is going to get snapped up probably by Liverpool.
Robinson as well.
Robinson would have been the player before that, but then Kirkes has had this breakout season. So then where does Aït-Nouri fit? And, there's a lot of teams who I think are fine in the fullback positions, but with us, I feel like even though we've got 3 fullbacks who, I've given Porro a lot of stick this season, but, on his day he can be amazing. They can all be really good. It is at the moment, they have just been mismanaged because, now we're having conversations whether Spence is strong enough on the right and he's better on the left.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
And he's been dropped in recent weeks because of that. For Porro and Dogi to start in that original, sort of Ange back line. But yeah, I think Aït-Nouri ticks a lot of boxes. Great creator, great, goal and assist numbers again this season. Started off really well and sort of since Wolves' resurgence in the latter part of this season have been really, really good under Vitor Pereira. Yeah, I like that. Again, the thing is, the funny thing is, every time you say your name, I'm like, yeah, and then I'm like, but I can't see it as well because I know. It's just we don't know what this situation is going to be. This is what makes this video so good, but also. Yeah, a bit confusing at the same time.
To live in a bit of a a fantasy world it's been so miserable this season, obviously, isn't it? It's like, it's good to kind of think about, and if we get Champions League football, a lot of this does kind of change. A lot of the situation does kind of change in terms of who we should be able to bring in and who we should be able to attract. Like, it does change a little bit. Whereas if we're not in the Champions League, then obviously it's just I think this summer could be a really, really scary one for Tottenham, and I think it could be one that is going to take quite a while to recover from. But yeah, I really like Aït-Nouri, someone I've kind of had my eye on for a while. Again, I think a lot of people have, and I do think, again, like you kind of said, that there's going to be a lot of other fullbacks that are kind of going to be maybe ahead of him in the pecking order in terms of clubs that will be sort of looking at that or need that left back, should I say? But yeah, with Aït-Nouri, very, very good in the final third. I just think he's a different sort of profile to a doggy, which is something that we do need. I think that's a bit like your wingers. I think that's kind of really important in modern football to kind of shape your kind of squad in that way. So I think he would be my left back choice. And then it just kind of leaves that midfielder, which I think is going to be, I mean, if we're talking unrealistic, this is probably going to be the most
Yeah,
idealistic
God,
pick
take
out
the floor.
of the five. Carlos Baleba, throw the bag at him if we get Champions League football.
Wow.
But it's just the thing is, it's just like I think as a lot of Spurs fans have been saying it for a long time, while Ange has been the manager, that like if you can get as close to a perfect six for Ange ball, Carlos Baleba is that. That doesn't mean that he can't be that for other managers as well. He is so good, breaking up play, breaking lines. Adam Wharton would 100% be on here as well. I think Adam Wharton is fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. Again, I think those are two massive pie in the sky shouts that are just not going to happen. But if you're saying 250 mil on 5 players, especially if we get Champions League, I'm trying to divvy up a lot of that money to go to bringing in someone like Baleba or Wharton. Again, yeah, Wharton impressed me. I mean, Wharton's impressed me a lot, obviously, but in that game on Saturday in the FA Cup semi-final, the way he was just first to everything, reading things, breaking up the play, so intelligent, moves the ball so quickly, doesn't hold on to it for too long, just so punchy, like with his passing. That's what Tottenham need. We really do. Like that ability to slow things down and control. I think England generally, if England don't really produce those kind of midfielders, I think Wharton is the first one in a long time to be produced out of England to be able to do that, out of that kind of more Spanish mold. Like, you know, if his name was Adam Whartinho, like he would be in that Spanish team probably. Like he's got that ability to control and conduct games, but also do a lot of the brilliant defensive stuff as well. Just first to every ball, makes it look so. Like I quoted his compilation that went around from the Villa game on Saturday. It's just, I know it's cliche and sounds obvious and it's not the most insightful, but it just makes everything look so easy. And I think a lot of Tottenham players have got a habit of making the easy things look quite hard at times. But he's a superb player. So I think it'd be out of them to spend the biggest amount of money on out of the lot on one of those two. But I think more realistic targets, I think, again, the kind of drop down in quality from those two players. I think Johnny Cardoso is an interesting player because I do think
that's a name I was going to raise actually, because there is that option, isn't there? So
yeah, I don't think that would be a bad thing at all. I really don't, because I could see Spurs letting go of Bentancur and Basuma in the summer, and I think then maybe obviously you've got Gray there, and you have to think about his development, of course, as well. But I do think someone that's played a lot of big games for Betis in a big season for them, obviously on the cusp of Champions League football, they're going deep in the Conference League as well. I've seen a lot of people say I think he's just a slightly better version of Pierre or Højbjerg, but that's not a bad thing. Like I'm not going to go as far as to say I think Spurs have missed Højbjerg this season, because I do think it was the right time to kind of move on from him. But I also hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
I think having that type of character in the squad to bring on half an hour, sort of either kind of like with half hour to go just to settle things down, although Højbjerg again had a bit of a habit of, when Spurs were settled, making things even more erratic at times. But I do think we kind of missed that sort of character. I think Cardoso has shown up in a lot of big games and a lot of big moments. Again, I don't think he's that number 6 in terms of being able to penetrate through the lines as much as Baleba or Adam Wharton. But I remember watching the game against Madrid, and he was doing that quite a lot as well, kind of breaking lines with his pass and taking players out of the game. Again, controlling presence, likes to put his foot on the ball. Again, against low blocks, I think that's valuable as well. Someone that can kind of just switch the ball from side to side and manipulate that low block, move them around. Angelo Stiller, again, is a profile that I think is really, really well equipped to do that. But I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's signed a new contract at Stuttgart in the comments.
Yeah, a month or so ago, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's just to try and get better money for him. Who knows? Like that, it might not be off the table. And again, I think United fans have started. I think Alice did a video about it the other day where she was kind of saying, or I saw her tweet about it, I think, saying, oh, for United, I think he'd be really good. Again, I think that, someone that's able to, like I said, just dictate tempo, slow things down, break down low blocks, move the ball from side to side, break up play. You're asking a lot from these kind of midfielders, but I think, I don't know, in an ideal world, I think it would be Wharton or Baleba and just drop the bag on either of them. But I just don't think that's going to happen. But for this, It's a YouTube video at the end of the day, isn't it? Let's do what we can do, what we like. We can spend. It's not, we're spending the club's money. Let's do it how we feel like we should. We should do it. I think those are two players that Spurs should absolutely be all over. And I think if we do get Champions League football, then obviously comes into play a little bit more. Will Spurs spend 100 million? Very much doubt it. Obviously, regardless of what happens. But yeah, I'm in love with both of those players. Absolutely both of those
Yeah.
players. Again, they kind of go in again in the thing of bringing in younger players who have got a really high ceiling. But I think in terms of Wharton, it's just like head on a swivel. Baleba's got that as well. It's a toss up of a coin for those two, in my opinion. I know, like I said, we need experience, but I think you're getting that with Guehi at the back. Wharton and Baleba are way more than comfortable playing Premier League football on a weekly basis, and could make that step up to Champions League football. Any Spurs fan that would say Wharton's too young, needs more time, we were all calling for him to start in the Euros last summer. So, and look at how young players coming through have got that bravery now. I think I've kind of probably, you know what, I'm gonna lean towards Adam Wharton actually, but either of those two would satisfy my needs big time. But some cheap alternatives, I think Stidler or Cardoso would be pretty decent as well.
Yeah, I like that list, mate. I think what's that? So Guehi, Tell, Delap,
Wharton,
Ryan 8 Nouri, and Adam Wharton. Wow. I mean,
not bad sum, that, is it?
if we did that, I think I might actually send that clip to Levy's email and see if
Pop
he
it in the post.
see what he has to say about that. I think that's a very strong thing. I just, yeah, I think what when you were talking about Adam Wharton about England and wanting that sort of role, I feel like for years the FA wanted their version of Xavi. They wanted England's version of Xavi, and they tried it with so many different players, and it just didn't work out. And everyone thought like the way you were talking about him. I remember people talking about Jack Wilshere. I feel like everyone thought Jack
Very
Wilshere was
similar.
going to be that
Very
player,
similar. Yeah.
but obviously injury with him. But yeah, even I mean, Adam Wharton's had injury this season, and he's come back and he's been absolutely phenomenal. And many clubs, I mean, even I think I don't know how realistic it was, but Real Madrid were even linked with him. But my
You
final
can see
question,
why
then,
though, can't you? Can see why
yeah,
though, even if it's not going to happen, that you can see why. Like we
yeah,
shouldn't. Nobody should be surprised that Real Madrid are looking at Adam Wharton, whether they are or
yeah.
not. But if that was true, nobody should be surprised about it.
Yeah, and my final question for you, Ben, if you can summarise, Tottenham's most important signing this season is.
I think it would be. I think it would be Wharton, or
Yeah,
or Wharton or Baleba, or a centre half in Marc Guehi as well. I think those should be the priorities, because if Romero leaves early in the summer, or if we know Romero's leaving, the priority should be to replace him straight away. But the priority at Spurs for a long time that has pre-existed, Romero leaving or not, has been that midfield as well. So I think it's the toss-up of a coin between the centre half and the centre midfielder.
yeah. Well, mate, I really appreciate you jumping on for this.
My pleasure, mate.
Really good names there, really good insight. I appreciate you going away and doing some prior work to that. Great conversation as always. But before we go, where can people find you? If people don't know who you are by now in this Tottenham space, where have they been? But where can they find you?
Thanks, mate. YouTube, Ben Bowman, TikTok, Ben Bowman as well. And then I've got a second account, which is mainly Spurs stuff, Ben Bowman THFC. And Twitter as well, just my name. Fairly simple. But yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for having me on, mate. Enjoyed it.
yeah, of course. I'll put all those links in the description down below. And if you have enjoyed, guys, leave your like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And until next time, I think I'll be doing a reaction to the West Ham game. I'll see you guys then. Bye.
Nice one.